Good evening and salutations, Bills Mafia. This is a Friday night forecast brought to you by the Cold Front Report. Tonight, I have my friend Evan Zinger. Evan, how you doing?
I'm doing great, Travis. How about yourself?
Can't complain. It's a hot one out here. We're getting ready for preseason game number 3. So, for anyone who is uninitiated at the Friday night forecast, we delve into the upcoming game. We give you our takes, but not only that, we're asking for yours as well. So, if you have any hot takes regarding the game, statistics, number of snaps, drop it in the comments below. We'll get to them later on. Like always, we would really appreciate you if you subscribed, liked, and shared the podcast. Let's get those algorithms up and really get the good word out. So EJ wasn't able to make it today, but I'm going to recap our buy and sell portion of last week. I went 50. I was 3 for 6. I didn't get my lock. I thought that they would boo Mitch Trubisky, and you heard some boos, you heard some clapping. So I'm going to be an honest man and say that it wasn't a boo. EJ, however, 0 for 6. Tough. Is it a coincidence we don't see him today? I don't know. So let's start by jumping into the news. Bills fans, the Bills themselves were flying high after that destruction of Chicago last week. It was short-lived. It seems that the Bills were bit by the injury bug. We have a handful of guys out. Majority of our secondary is injured. Not only that, but we had a handful of players put on the COVID list due to close contact with a coach. Some notable guys were Star Lotulelei, Cole Beasley. So long story short, we're getting them back, but we really don't know how much they're going to play. On top of that, you got the collision between Poyer and McKenzie. He's hanging out there in a sling. I think it was Taron Johnson who ended up with an arm wrap. Levi Wallace was hurt. Obviously, the guys from the game, Spencer Brown, Stevenson. So we got a laundry list of injuries. Does this concern you, Evan?
It concerns me to the extent that, I think a lot of these are just minor things, but, eventually, one of the minor things is just going to be oh, it's a lingering thing, or, oh, it's actually way more severe than we thought at the beginning. And when you have so many of them, there's going to be one guy at least that's like that. So we just have to wait and see what guy that turns out to be. You hope it's not one of your starters, but if it's not, then you hope for one of the depth guys to come in and do their piece. But then you just hope also that guy's not hurt at this point. So there's just so many going around that it's always cause for concern.
Yeah, I mean, you bring up a great point. Football has a 100% chance of being injured. There's no getting around it. But the thing that does concern me is the COVID issues.
For sure.
Obviously, it's been beaten to death. We're all aware of it. It's hitting the NFL. It's hitting at home. I'm just worried if something like what happened on, what was it, Sunday? I guess the news came out with Beasley and co. If they have to sit out 5 days during practice or, majority of the week, I'm just worried that we don't see these guys. I'm worried that they don't get enough reps and they're not around the team enough to really be ready for an NFL game. Obviously, with guys contracting COVID, that's one thing. Obviously, we want to be worried about their health first and foremost. But with the protocols that are laid out, there are going to be casualties who not necessarily any fault of their own, aside from not being vaccinated, but you get guys who are just in close contact who are testing negative but are forced to sit out that 5-day period. Do you feel the same? Do you share the same sentiments as me going into the season?
Yeah, I would say I do. The one player that I remember when hearing that he got put on that list with those 5 other players, that's like I would say like annoyed me, honestly, like legitimately annoyed me was Star, mainly because he not like it's no secret that I'm not a huge fan of him as a player, but I'm sure he's a fine guy, but uh, the fact that he opted out last year because of COVID and then he's still not vaccinated. It's like, okay, like, like I'm just confused what his stance on the whole issue is because, like, it seems like he's trying to get out of something. Again, I don't think he's that kind of guy, but it just seems off to me, you know?
At the very least, it's ironic, for sure. you
Yeah.
know,
Someone mentioned that
who
like
know?
someone mentioned to me, I think on the Bills subreddit brought up the thought that maybe he's got like some sort of like heart condition or something like that. But with a lot of these vaccines, from what I've heard at least, is you know something that's a lot worse than the vaccine for you. If you have like a certain heart condition, is just getting COVID. So I mean, either outcome's not going to be great, but it'd be better to take your chances on the vaccine than just trying to fight
Yeah,
off COVID by
I mean,
itself.
none of us are doctors, so
No,
we don't know if there are those underlining issues, and that's what I was going to bring up. Who knows? Maybe there is, and maybe that was the reason why he did not play last year in the first place.
that's very true.
But
Yeah.
then again, yeah, either way, it is definitely ironic, which kind of rolls into the next bit of news. The Isaiah McKenzie fine and subsequently Cole Beasley fine. I don't really want to get into how we necessarily feel personally on pro, anti, for it, whatever. All I have to say on this is the NFL has as good a job that they did last year managing and weaving their way through the whole COVID situation. Their stance this year and their protocols to me are stupid. I think the fact that you are rewarding vaccinated players by putting them in situations and having protocol that give them a higher percentage or a higher chance of contracting, spreading the virus, and then at the same time they are punishing unvaccinated players by putting them in situations which actually protect them more in those situations. To me, it's asinine. I think I would have so much more respect for the NFL as an organization if they just had one size fits all. This is the rules. Even if they had a mandate saying, if you want to play, you get vaccinated. This is, me personally, I'm a libertarian. I'm a capitalist. I'm totally fine with a business saying, hey, these are our rules. And if you don't like it, go find another job. Totally fine. But the fact that they're wishy-washy on it is what bothers me. Now, we got Dennis over here saying he had enough of COVID. I'm sure we all had, and we're
Yeah.
just touching on the topic. We're not gonna drag on it. I just wanted to put that out there that I think they need to, and I think we're going to see a change in the protocol regarding vaccinated players. What do you think, Evan?
I pretty much agree with everything you just said. Like, I can't really even add anything to it because I think you pretty much nailed it. The one thing I do want to say is that when it comes to creating content and stuff like that, you have people that say, like, sorry, enough of COVID, that kind of thing. I just have to say, like, I'm not saying that you're wrong for wanting to just come here and not hear anything about it. But the fact is that if we dealt with COVID as a society appropriately, then you wouldn't have to come here and hear about that stuff. So I just hope that everyone's doing the right thing in regards to their body and the people around them.
All right. Well, that's enough of that.
Yep.
Let's move on to
Yeah.
let's move on to the topic at hand. This is the preseason finale. More importantly, Kids Day. So
Yes.
I hope a lot of you guys out there are
that sounded way too
hoping.
creepy. Most importantly, kids. Oh yes, yes.
Well, listen, I know as a future father, there's gonna be a age limit when outside of Kids Day, they're not coming to the game because let's be honest, it's a lot of what we partake in is not very kids friendly. We've all been there. We've all heard things. We've all seen things. So it's one day where you kind of get you get to baptize the future of Bill's Mafia. So outside of that, getting into the game, McDermott announced that we're going to see starters anywhere from one play to a into the third quarter, such as Sean McDermott quote right there.
I want to see. I want to see like I literally want to see one play. Allen come in, one play, just throw it as far as he can. That's it. Just guys, you remember I still have guys. You remember I still have a cannon, right?
Yeah, right. I'm still here. So looking into week 3, what are some of the things that you are looking for?
I'd say probably just for one person or one player per position group, just to do something to make themselves really stand out. Because like even you have these players at certain points where at week 3 in the preseason you can't let's say if you're someone like Nick Mcleod or I guess not Hodgins, who's not playing, but someone like at his level, you can't just like play well and expect to make the team. You got to like do something exceptional because you're low on the totem pole. So I'm think if I were to take a guess, I think probably the biggest like I'm gonna say lock to make the roster out of those like fringe guys, I would say is probably or actually I wouldn't call it a lock, but the guy who has like the best chance out of those kind of guys is probably Andre Smith. At the same time, I don't know whether I put him in that same level, but he's played very, very well throughout the preseason. I'd like to see Nick Mcleod do something else because he's made a one particularly good play in every single game so far. So if he can make something else, who knows where he can go? He'll maybe go to the practice squad, or maybe he'll pull a shocker and like I know I mentioned on when was our last podcast? Monday? Was it Monday? I think. Either way, Sunday. The last one. I mentioned like, hey, maybe there's some players that the front office is lower or higher on than the general public thinks. So maybe Nick Mcleod could even, shock the public and take over the spot from someone like even Dane Jackson, for example.
Yeah, you make a good point because unfortunately, especially now, the last 2 years where some of these reporters can't even report what's going on in training camp. They can't mention where guys are lining up. All they can really say is so-and-so beat so-and-so. And then you can kind of piece it together by saying, okay, well, that guy's a starter, so he took reps with the first team, so that must mean he's trending up. It's hard to know what these guys are doing in practice. And as much as we want to gauge how we think this roster is going to come together based on what we can see in the preseason, I mean, there's 20 to 30 practices that we don't see anything, and we're just getting snippets with report-wise. So you're right. And being a preseason game, that is their opportunity to kind of put themselves on stage. So I agree with you guys like Nick Mcleod, Andre Smith. They're firmly bubble guys. Or Andre Smith, to me, if we keep 6 linebackers, I think he's a lock, but he's battling it out for that 5th linebacker role. Nick Mcleod, where, even if he doesn't make the roster, you got to think he's shown enough in the preseason to really solidify himself on the practice squad. Everyone seems to think that people go crazy and pick up other people off of practice squads, but you have to remember, in order for you to pick someone off of the practice squad, you got to activate them to your active roster. So that's something that you got to put into consideration. For me, I wanted to see starters. I just wanted to see, well, not necessarily see, but more of let these guys get their dress rehearsal, so to speak, in. I think it's very important. They've been going against each other for the last couple months. It's time for them to put it on a field versus another team. But after everything that's happened this week, I got to tell you, my priority, and I'm sure it's everybody, health. I mean, health is, that's the key. Luckily, we had an extra week to kind of facilitate healing, but got to get to health. Yeah. Something I want to bring up, do we think Gilliam is going to continue his trending in an upward direction? And could he be kept as a third tight end for the sake of roster spots?
I think Gilliam's one of those weird examples where, I won't call it a weird example, because you have some players where at this point, you know what they are as, whatever their position is, but because there's only a limited amount of roster spots, they're almost battling it out, or they are battling it out with players at different positions. So we're not, we could be talking about, with like running back, for example, you got Singletary, Moss, and Breida. And then at tight ends, you got Knox, Hollister, and Sweeney. So it's like if you throw Gilliam into like both those categories, it's like which one is he going to beat out? So or are they treating him as separately as just like an athlete or just a multi-threat fullback,
like
kind of tweener fullback, I guess. Yeah. So by terms of like Gilliam making the team overall, it's going to come down to, I think, what they think of Sweeney, actually. Just if they like Sweeney, then, and it's not, and I'm not saying that Gilliam's a better tight end than Sweeney, but I think they might think that Gilliam is a better fullback type player than Sweeney is a tight end. So that, I think, will be what makes the difference between him being on the roster and not.
And to piggyback off of your point, where no disrespect to Sweeney, I think he's exceeded all expectations. He catches everything. He's a good blocker. He's a solid tight end. The issue is, how often are you going to utilize your third tight end versus a fullback who can catch the ball, who can run the ball, and who is a somewhat of a core special teamers? That's where I feel Gilliam will edge out fringe guys. In the same way guys like Tywan Jones make this team. We all know he's not going to get snaps at tailback. And if we cut him for a guy like Antonio Williams, he's not going to get snaps either, barring two major injuries during a game.
Yeah, it's basically
so
a net. Sorry to interrupt. Because it's basically like a net loss in regards if you were to cut a guy like Jones, because like, you have him as a running back in the same way that like, Madden would have him as a running back, or how Madden has Reed Ferguson as a tight end, for example. It's like they're there in a spot just because they have to be. If there was a position that was just called special teamer, like in the actual like official depth chart, then a guy like Jones would be there. And we'll see, maybe Gilliam might be there if they feel he can contribute in that way. But
yeah, I'm trending in the way, like we mentioned it before, but I'm of the mind that I think his versatility keeps him on this roster, and guys like Sweeney, he can go to the practice squad, and barring injury, we may be able to see him. Moving on, something else I want to touch on. Do you think, not only for this upcoming game, but possibly during the season, do you think we continue to see this aggressive approach on offense regarding fourth down play calling? Last year, we saw it. You could tell once McDermott got analytics guys involved, we saw an upswing in fourth down conversion attempts and conversion. I mean, we were going for fourth down on our own side of the field this preseason. Not only that, we were going for 2-point conversions. Obviously, I think we're working on that. But you see a general uptick in this aggressive play calling.
For sure. And I think one of the main reasons why is because I'm not saying this in regards to him as like from a personal sense, but just from like a football sense, is that Sean McDermott and Brian Dable seem like people that just don't forget things. And I think that AFC Championship game is just stuck right in their heads. And of course, one of the big criticisms from that game was the choice late in that second half not to go for the touchdown, instead kicking the field goal and keeping it a 2-score game. Of course, Kansas City picked apart the defense to such an extent that it didn't really matter at the end of the day, but still, like, you had people talking about it after the game and still talking about it now. So I feel like with that in the back of their mind, they're going to be more aggressive than ever before.
Especially because up until that point, we saw much of the opposite. We saw an aggressive McDermott, an aggressive Dayball for most of the season, which I'm sure a lot of Bills fans appreciated. And not only that, but it was proved to be successful. So it was a very big head scratcher for me because it was working. It's not like it was middle of the road. I mean, this was the best third down team in the league. This was the best fourth down team in the league. So you're right. It's when the chips were down and it mattered the most, we kind of went into our shell. And the players have that taste in their mouth. And I think you're absolutely onto something as far as the coaching. I guess lastly, if there's any key positional battles you can think of, I'll start. I think cornerback, which we already mentioned, is going to be big in this game because, like we touched on before, there's a lot of guys injured. Trey White is probably going to be one of those guys who plays more closer to one play versus an entire half of football.
Yeah.
So that leaves a ton of young guys who are going to get a lot of run with NFL quality players on the other side, lining up on the other side of them, which guys like Mcleod and some of the younger guys who essentially have been lining up against scrubs, they're going to get some run to, some serious NFL talent. We could see guys like Siran Neal try to make a comeback. I really liked what I heard from him during his interview. Everyone seems to get on Siran Neal a lot, and deservedly so. But as far as cornerbacks, it's like being a quarterback. You can't live in the past. You got to move on. So guys like Nick Mcleod, guys like Siran Neal, and even seeing what Taron Johnson has to offer if he's able to play. Any key position battles that you're really looking in?
Well, the one position battle that at the beginning of the preseason and training camp I thought was going to be a much bigger deal, but I, for some reason, just haven't heard much about it, was because it must have been because one of the players just really fell off or something like that, was ballot guard, because they seem to be very much behind, Cody Ford, and it seems like the line is pretty solidified at this point. Even though, like, last year I thought, Butker played well enough. Like, he played to the point where, yeah, you need a new guard, but I think for what he played well enough. And I haven't really seen much from Ford in the past that would lead me to say, like, oh yeah, he definitely deserves to start over a guy like maybe Butker. And by terms of, like, the positional battles that we actually are talking about and actually are seeing, honestly, it with me, it comes down to just obviously with the defensive line, it's mostly rotation. So I almost wouldn't even consider anyone a starter on that line, if you're being completely honest. But I would like to see the order at which the defensive tackles are sort of ranked at this point, I would say, because it'd be Ed Oliver and then Starr, and then probably be Butler and Phillips right there. And then I'm trying to think, is there anyone else below? Probably
Well,
guys like Bryant or is Bryant didn't get cut yet, I don't think, right?
No, the Bills, they released Trayvon something, Hester.
Yeah.
That guy, he got put on injured. He got put on injured reserve, I believe. But yeah, and then I think it's an interesting battle at backup one tech between Phillips and Butler. I'm not a big Vernon Butler fan at all. Every time I watch the guy, he's just there. He doesn't do much. And then listening to Leslie Frazier talk about how this year he seems to be more engaged and more willing to put in the time on task and put in the work leads you to believe that last year he wasn't. So if this guy isn't working his tail off like a Justin Zimmer, and he's basically gotten this far on his draft status, he's a guy that if you can save money and get rid of him, I'm all for that. I know he provides size, but clearly size is not, outside of length, size is not a huge need in this defensive scheme the way it looks. But yeah, you brought up some great points. So let's get into our buy or sell. So everyone who's with us in the chat, we're going to go through half a dozen takes, and we're either going to buy them or we're going to sell them, depending on how we feel. These are all pertaining to this week's game. And if you guys in the chat have anything to add, please drop it in the comments. I got a handful ready to go for our fan forecast, but, the more the merrier. So the first one, Allen will play at least 2 series. What do you think, Evan?
I'll say 1. Plays just 1.
So you're going to sell it?
Yeah, I'm selling that.
Yeah, this is a tough one. I can definitely see 1 if they go and march down the field and they score a touchdown. That's all they need to see. However, I don't think if they don't score a touchdown, I could see them marching them out. So just to be devil's advocate, I'm going to buy, but I'm right there with you. It's a toss up for me. So Evan's selling that Allen will play at least 2 series. I'm going to buy. I think if anything, he will play 2 series. And we got some friends in the chat who agree with me. So that doesn't count for anything, but no. Let's move on.
They don't count. They're not
Motors.
Sorry, guys. You mean the world to us, but
Motor scores a 3rd straight touchdown.
I'll buy that. I can see it.
Yeah, he has been pretty electric in the preseason. It is the preseason, but I think when you're evaluating somebody's growth at running back, I think it holds a lot more merit than some of the other players because that 4th down conversion that ended up in a touchdown, that was all on Devin Singletary. Half of it was on the absolute atrocious tackling and pursuit angles on the Bears, but Devin made that happen. The offensive line did not do him any favors. So with that being said,
knowing my luck, what'll happen is what your situation will be what happens where Allen comes out, plays the 1 drive, they don't score, so they bring him back out for a 2nd drive. They get down there and score, and then Allen himself vultures the touchdown. So I'm going to lose on both those regards. So that's probably what's gonna happen. But
well, you just spoke it into existence, my friend.
Yeah.
All right. 3rd take. Hughes and Addison trot out for the first defensive series.
Ooh. I'm going to sell on that. I think they bring out Rousseau and Hughes. Just the idea that you can have some veteran and youth out there at the same time, and it'll be something that they can work on throughout the season as well. Because it's not you can't really expect to be super consistent at any position. I don't think where more than one there's more than one position on the field at once. Where you have one, or sorry, when you have two just like or rookie players, essentially two like super young guys, because they can feed off each other in certain ways, right? So if you have a guy like Hughes who's been around forever, and then you have Rousseau kind of just playing like a wrecking ball, then I think they're just gonna try that out and see if they can have that defensive end chemistry together, sort of.
Yeah, I think I'm going to sell as well, because when you look at it, analytically, they can march any of these guys out there. I mean, there's even, I'm not even talking week one, but I could see one of I could see one of these guys off the team. So it's really, to me, I can see a combination. Maybe they want to see F.A. Obata with some of the starters. Maybe they want to see a Boogie Basham. I mean, Rousseau hasn't done anything to lose his starting left end position, although, it is preseason. I just think it's too much needs to go right to have them both on the field. I think we're going to see both of them, but to me, it doesn't matter who comes out first. But I just think it was an interesting take regarding having them both out there, since we haven't seen them. But I'm with you. I think it's going to be Rousseau and either Hughes or Addison. My money will go with Hughes, because Hughes has been playing the right side of the defensive line. But hey, maybe they want to see what Rousseau looks like on that side, and they put out Addison. All right, moving on. The defensive line accounts for 3 or more sacks tomorrow.
I'm going to sell on that, mainly because, one, I think Green Bay's offensive line is significantly better. And also, I think this might be the week where Frazier and McDermott just try out some sort of different blitz packages and stuff like that, just to get ready, kind of thing. And because of that, maybe a linebacker will poach one of those sacks. So, yeah, I think I'm going to sell that.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally understandable. We didn't even have our as dominant as our defensive line was last week. The sack totals weren't astronomical, but the pressure was there. And I mean, how many throwaways did we see? How many quarterback hits, hurries? To me, that's important. But I did go with sack total, because that's something quantifiable. When we talk about pressures, there's so many different statistics that it gets really muddy there.
And according to who,
but I'm going to buy.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to buy just, again, I could see both happening. But once you get, the reason why I'm going to buy is because once you get guys like Bakhtiari off the field and the starters, who knows? And I'm going to put our backup, our second and third string guys. I'm gonna take them over anyone else's backup offensive line any day of the week. Now that we kind of gotten to really see what we can expect out of some of these guys like Obata. I mean, Obata and Darryl Johnson, they made these guys look like scrubs, which they were. A lot of the guys are going it, but they make it look too easy. I mean, I know Obata didn't have the numbers, but if you go back and watch and look at his win rate, he had himself a game.
Well, he had 7.
Moving on,
even talk like discounting his win rate. I think he had like 7 pressures last week. I want to say something like that. Which 7 pressures on how many snaps he had?
Half a game, Yeah,
that's like half his snaps. Like
there was a couple times I saw, and not only him, but a couple times I saw the defensive ends not play contain with Fields, but they did correct that later on in the game, and Fields' play really diminished after that. Moving on to the fifth take. Bass finishes the preseason with a perfect 100% kick percentage.
Oh, I can buy that. I can pretty confidently buy that, actually. Yeah. The only thing that I think would stop it is if McDermott just goes like fuck it and just sorry, I probably shouldn't keep my language. That's the only way I can really put it. Just goes screw it and kicks or has Bass try like a 60-yard field goal at the end of the half kind of thing, right?
Yeah, you're right.
We could probably make it, but yeah.
Hey, if there's only a handful of guys that have the opportunity to make that or have made it in a practice setting, you're right, and that kind of gives me pause. But that being said, I firmly believe Bass is going to finish as a top 5 kicker this year. If he doesn't make the All-Pro this year, I believe it's gonna happen in the next 2 or 3 years. I've mentioned it a handful of times. This guy, when he first came in, he kicked the ever-living crap out of every ball, whether it was an extra point or a 60-yard field goal. He's kicking with more finesse, and if you notice, just keep an eye on it. Notice where these balls and the trajectory of these balls are headed. A lot of times last year, we'd see them clear over the upright, and we left it up to the refs to make the call. This year, they're right down the middle. So I'm going to buy just on the fact that I'm super bullish on Bass.
It'd be interesting to take a look, like if like someone who's like more knowledgeable about like kicking motion and stuff like that, to see. I promise I'm not using this saying just to make myself laugh because I'm like 12 years old, but I'd like to see his like kicking stroke and how he hits the balls. I know that sounds. I know. But legitimately though,
I hate when my stroke kicks the balls.
No, but legitimately, like I would like to see his stroke compared to what he was like at like sort of like the beginning of last year. Because probably his more coach, like violent and wild, right? So
yeah, his kicking coach has come out. His college kicking coach has come out and said he's one of the most competitive person he's ever met. So when you marry that with the raw talent that this guy has, you know, it's a long off season, and I could see him going into you know, the weeds when it comes to correcting any of those missteps. Michael, what are we kidding? I don't know. I don't know what we're kidding about.
He's like
our strokes.
He's like, I came here to watch like some serious football conversation. You know, you have a guy with like the humor of someone that's like 8 years old talking about 12 strokes and balls. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Lastly, we finally, for the first time, we get to hear the roar of the crowd yell Groot. The way a la Bruce.
I'm going to sell on that because, well, again, this is sort of like when we when you say we hear the crowd yell Groot like Bruce, are we talking on TV or at the game, or because, you know,
I think either way you'll hear it. If it happens, you're going to hear it on TV or in the crowd. You're going to hear it because that's what everyone's like. He's going to make a tackle. It could be 10 yards down the field and they're going to yell it.
Yeah.
I'm buying all the way.
The only reason I'm selling it is just because, like, yeah, he'd be going up against some like really good tackles, and I'm not saying he won't make a play or anything or won't make a tackle 10 yards down the field, but out of any week, I'd probably bet against that if there was any team I'd bet against, or bet it against. So it'd be the Packers or like the Browns maybe, but that's about it.
Yeah, no, you know, if it meant him getting a sack or a tackle for loss or, you know, interception, forced fumbled, I'm there with you because that requires a lot. But I'm telling you, this guy makes a tackle 10 yards down the field or he just knocks over somebody, you're going to hear it. Like Brian said in the chat, the stadium is going to be lit. There's going to be people who haven't been there in almost 2 years, maybe more.
Watch everyone
I'm
chant.
curious to see how. Go.
Watch everyone chant Roos as opposed to Groot. And
Yeah,
just to mess with you, it won't happen. That if they cheer something, it won't be that. But
yeah. There's people are gonna be chomping at the bit. I'm curious to see how full the stadium is gonna be because I went to the second practice, and I don't know. They said there was like 15,000 people there, and I don't know how many people they normally got at St. John Fisher's, but it was walking around the concourse. It wasn't like game day, but if you've ever been there and got to your seats before 12, it kind of felt like that. And Bills Mafia travels. I mean, these I've seen people selling tickets. I mean, a lot of times the only reason why people sell the tickets is because they get charged full price for their season tickets. They have to pay for those tickets too. But I even looked up on resale, and they were still under $100, but still they were $70-$80 for lower bowl section. But yeah, that's it. So just to recap, I'm buying, you're selling that Allen will play at least 2 series. We're both buying Motor Singletary scores his 3rd touchdown. We're both selling that Hughes and Addison start at defensive end. I'm buying, you're selling that the D-line accounts for 3 sacks. We both agree that Bass will finish with a perfect kick percentage. And I am buying that we will hear Groot from the crowd, and you are selling. All right, so let's get into the fan forecast. Let me go through some of these takes. I'll start at the top. Let's see. COVID. All right, here we go. Bold prediction: 4 runs in a row, and then Allen goes deep to Davis. I'm going to sell it because that's a lot going on right there.
That's only the reason why. But let's say it wasn't as bold in like 3 runs and then deep to someone. I think
I can get on board with the amount of runs, but then we're talking about going deep, and then we're talking about to a certain player. What is the actual chances of it happening?
Yeah, and I don't think they would bring Allen in just to hand the ball off constantly. So, I don't think they would have him start to do that because you can have Trubisky or Fromm or Webb do that. So, what's the point, kind of thing?
All right, moving on. You want to see Rousseau and Epinesa on the ends for an entire half, and Boogie playing the inside with them for a half as well. I agree that we're going to see this. It's just not going to be for a half. I mean, there's too many position battles going on to really allow your first-round draft pick to play deep into a game. And Epinesa, who's really proven himself, that's another guy when we talked about who could be starting opposite of Hughes. It may be Epinesa. And hey, if we end up trading one of those guys, I definitely think it'll be Epinesa. But as far as this take, I'm going to sell it because, again, they're not playing that much.
Yeah, I'm with you there too, I would say. As much as I would like to see it, admittedly, but
yes, of course. Well, this is a take, but I don't know how much. Well, we buy or sell it. Hot take: veteran presence is overblown. Addison and Hughes is gone to make, Hughes is gone to make room for the youth movement. Young Edmonds is a leader. I'm not sure this will happen, but if it was up to me, I would be on the phone trying to move one of these guys. So I'm going to sell just for the fact that I don't think it's going to happen because you got to find the right trading partner. But this is what I would do, because if it means getting rid of a younger guy off the roster, they're expendable. Listen, Hughes is a good player. I really like Hughes, and Addison brings something to the table too, but I truly believe they're expendable.
I am going to disagree with you, actually, mainly because the team when it comes to the edge position, outside of Addison and Hughes, it's you have or Basham might move out there, but he's either way. Basham, Brousseau, and Epinesa are all so young, and I think you do need some veteran presence to coach them along at least. I don't. Sorry. I don't think that Edmonds is also the sort of guy to like be the concrete like leader of a defense. Should you trade Addison or Hughes or both? I think if you were to like put it onto one player, it would probably be I'd say Hyde, because because obviously he's the leader of this. I'd say he's probably he sort of commands like center field. And you can see sort of like everyone in their positions. I always see him in games telling people where to go, even if they should just shift over like a little bit more and stuff like that. I think you just need more consistent overall play from Edmonds before I'd be willing to say like, oh, he's the leader of the defense, regardless of what, maybe the locker room sees him as that already. I don't know. I'm not part of the locker room, but we'll just have to see.
Yeah, I agree. I think him playing middle linebacker, him calling the plays, I think they're kind of it's kind of forcing the issue when he doesn't really and he's getting better at it, but he doesn't necessarily seem like that natural born leader, so to say, the way like a Micah Hyde, a Jordan Poyer, even Jerry Hughes. Like Jerry Hughes is a leader. That guy is he was voted captain by his peers. You hear he's a dog, so I agree with that latter part of the statement. Knox drops a pass. I'm going to say he doesn't drop a pass in this game.
I'm going to say he doesn't drop a pass because he's not going to get targeted.
Fair enough.
I think they'll have him in to maybe block when Allen's on the field, and then they might have him in a little bit for Trubisky if he plays. But I don't see him getting targeted. It's not that I don't see him getting targeted, but it's like I bet on him not being targeted over him being targeted.
Yep. This one I really like. Hot take: a 2021 starter isn't on the team yet. That's spicy. I don't agree with it because when you're at the precipice, the way the Bills are, the way the Bucks were, noted, and even Kansas City has some turnover, especially on the offensive line. But when you return your squad, I think you put yourself at a much better odds at repeating the same success. So I think we're pretty much set in stone with who we have. Anyone who gets added to this roster is going to be a lower end guy who will probably cycle in and off the roster themselves.
Yeah, and I think the only reason why a 2021 starter wouldn't be on the team yet is because of injuries. And if you sign a guy with and it's pretty much all low end talent out there right now, even if you sign a guy, like let's say, just a bunch of, God forbid, all the defensive ends are, except for Obata and Basham, are on a bus. Just them, and there's a crash. And all of them get hurt except for Obata and Basham. And, anyone, you could sign someone that's better than Obata or more ready than Basham, I'm sure, at this point. But, considering it's only 2 weeks away from games, it's like you're not going to have them as a starter week one.
Yeah, and Brian brings up Zach Ertz. I think that ship has sailed.
Yeah.
Whether or not even if that was a thing, I don't see it happening. And he's really on the decline, if you ask me. But and then Brian also brings up CJ Henderson. I know he's a big talk, especially how we really harped on the lack of depth or just healthy players at cornerback. The problem with CJ Henderson is the dude doesn't like to tackle. And that's the priority in this Sean McDermott defense.
Yeah.
Don't get beat and come up and tackle. So I don't necessarily see that happening.
Yeah. And it would be one thing if he just didn't tackle well, but I remember when he got drafted, there was a big piece that was done about him where there was a scout that
Yes.
said he has like a non-aggression pact with the enemy or
Yeah.
whatever. It's like, no, you can't.
Yeah.
It's not a what did Deion Sanders say? It was a business decision, I believe, that he sucked at tackling. Essentially, of course, Henderson isn't Deion, so you can't get away with not knowing how to or choosing not to tackle.
Yeah, and in the college game, you can kind of get away with ushering players out of bounds, especially if you're playing on that boundary corner.
Yeah.
But that's not happening in the NFL. And
I remember seeing a
to be
couple of games last year, where Henderson he got a beat for a catch, fell on the ground, and then just didn't tackle him. It's like he thought it was still college. Like the play was just dead immediately as soon as the guy hit the ground.
Yeah.
It's like you can't do that in the NFL. Like you got to learn that quick.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty much it. I think we'll wrap it up there. Any closing comments, thoughts on tomorrow's game, Evan?
I'm just I'm looking forward to one more game of sort of stress-free football, and then off to the real thing in 2 weeks of me getting up and pissing my pants for the whole morning, being nervous, and then getting into the game and being like, oh, okay, Bills are winning. This ain't that bad.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I'm a big preseason guy. I would be very upset if the NFL did away with the preseason. One, I think it's great to get especially having these Saturday 1:00 games is great. You can really fine tune your rituals, your grilling, whatever, what have you. But also, I appreciate watching these guys fighting for roster spots. I also like to see, play calling. You don't really get anything like that, but schematically, you're able to see what people will do. Like, for instance, the Reggie Gilliam. I mean, I'm sure we all wrote him off. The Jay Kumeros, even though he didn't have a stellar preseason, he had a great training camp. You really get a feel for some of these guys who you may have written off. So I'm going to sit back and enjoy it. Hopefully we get to see the offense score a touchdown, rest the starters after that, and then get after. I guess Love is starting.
I think he was hurt last week. Here, let me double check and see if.
Oh, was he?
Yeah, let me double check and see if he's playing. It says Jordan Love expected to face Bills, but Packers will limit his playing time, which it's preseason. Isn't everyone's playing time kind of limited?
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So where can these good people find you, Evan?
You can find me on Twitter at Evan_Zinger, or you could find me on, I'm going to friggin' lost my train of thought. Oh, fuck, damn it.
Well,
don't worry about it.
Just find me
on Twitter. Just find me on Twitter. That's it.
And we'll have you on next week. I know we won't have a game, but maybe we'll break down the roster. Either this week or next week, we'll go into our predictions for the season. We'll go game by game. Other than that, stay tuned. We'll see you next Friday for the Friday Night Forecast. Have a good one. Go Bills.
Yeah, go Bills.